So this takes us to the fourth foundation, authority or subversion. And Haidt argues again for the universality of this by saying this is something we can see across cultures, that we see lots of different languages which have special pronouns when you're showing respect. That we can look at studies of various animal behavior and see that chimps have these elaborate hierarchies where there's the top chimp and there's lower chimps and there's this sort of dominance hierarchy, and other animals do have that too. Another example you could have is with we could look at like ancient cultures, and you could look at ancient China. I actually used this freshman year, so seniors, I doubt you actually still remember this, but this slide was something I showed back then. It basically looks at the Confucian 5 relationships, and the premise of each of these relationships is that there's a dominant one, and then there's the weaker one, but the idea is that the dominant one is supposed to take care of the weaker one in the relationship, and thus it is a kind of mutually harmonious or mutually beneficial harmonious relationship. And I think the supporters of maintaining structures of hierarchy and authority in society are often making this argument that without properly observed hierarchy and without respect for authority, society would be chaos. And there would be there is something beneficial about allowing some people in society to be above others, and therefore for the people who are below, it is their responsibility to show respect and obey the authority instead of subvert that authority. And conversely, it's the job of the people in authority to take care of their social inferiors in some way. And this is why, to some extent, we see some of these ideas of I don't think many people say this at uni, but the man needs to be in charge of the home, or students must obey their parents. Maybe you hear a little bit more of that. And this is rooted in that idea. Again, common in many cultures. Now, how does this apply to politics? Well, Haidt argues that some people believe that respect for authority is pretty darn important. And you can see this in various manifestations of modern right-wing thought. Think of the ideas about the military, about how you have to show respect for the military. And again, that has to do some way with that loyalty thing, but I think it also has to do with this authority piece. I use this example of I support ICE. ICE as in Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This is clearly a response to this line of thinking: abolish ICE, that the government agency in question here is an oppressive force, and therefore we need to undermine it. And therefore I would argue that people on the left are generally less eager to, say, obey authority. Indeed, a slogan of the left in the 1960s was to question authority. We can see it in the celebration of modern protest movements, like the civil rights movement. And certainly that's not unique to the left, but I'd say the left often is especially likely to celebrate the kind of activists who challenge the system, who challenge the power. And in this regard, here's the question I will leave you with to write up in the chat, or to write up in the response field. What are some ways you see kind of respect for authority championed or challenged in modern politics? Can you come up with an example where you can see a political issue where the idea is there's someone who's in charge and you need to show them respect, or conversely, no, screw the person in charge, we're going to challenge them? If you can think of any examples of that, type them in the chat.